Hello, everyone. I am so excited to welcome our esteemed guest, Francis Mies, to the Studiolo this evening. Francis, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is always a pleasure to see you and hear you speak. I'm one of your biggest fans, but you have fans all around the world. And as I was preparing for this interview, I was sometimes actually moved to tears to read the impact you had on people's lives. So I'm truly honored to welcome you to the
Oh,
Studiolo
thank
where we,
you.
yes,
Thank you. I think that connection that happened because of my books was a real big surprise to me because I had always written poetry before I wrote this book, Under the Tuscan Sun. And, it was before the whole digital world, and poetry doesn't make many inroads around the world anyway, unless you're a Nobel Prize winner. And so when my book came out and I started meeting people from all over and it started being translated, it was such a surprise, such a gift to me that um, that connection was made. It made a huge difference in my life to be able to feel like people are actually reading something I wrote rather than my books of poetry, which, probably sold 1,000 copies at the most. It's quite a different experience. And it's been wonderful because I'm a traveler and I love meeting people everywhere I go. So this has really expanded my world.
yes. And you know what I wanted to do today? I wanted to kind of start with the theme of the exploring what the home means to us, so our own house. And I think you're really amazing in a way where you get to really make yourself at home wherever you go. And we will talk about your love for also renovating houses and giving them kind of a new life. And then
I'm
maybe
over
we
that. I'm definitely over that.
can,
I've
and maybe we
renovated too many.
Yes, but I think it's a special gift you have. And
Well,
then
it was fun.
we can talk about the idea of the piazza and the cities and even the world. And I think what will be kind of the overarching theme is from the home to also a travel and a meaningful way to travel, which is really lovely because it actually ties to the next two interviews in the Studiolo. Next week, I will have Olivia Frescobaldi, who will present her newest book called Inside Florence, where she actually takes us in the homes and palazzi of the beautiful Florentines, Florentines that are there by birth, or people who came and kind of expats who then became citizens of Florence. And then on April 5th, I will have Ross King, and we will talk about Jubilee and what it is, why this is a Jubilee year in Rome, and also what it means to have maybe a meaningful travel as a pilgrimage. So I think with that theme in mind, I would love to start with Bramasole. You made the entire world dream about this house, and I think the name, which means to yearn for the sun. Bramare is to yearn. How did you, first of all, discover the house, but also what were you yearning for when you arrived to Italy?
Well, the metaphorical sun, for sure. I had rented a house near Cortona in 1985 just by chance. I didn't know the area, but I had wanted for a long time to have a long period of time where I could uh, explore my interest in Italian art. I had studied Renaissance art and architecture and medieval art and architecture in college and had never really had a chance to settle in and see all the things I'd studied. So that was basically what drew me to Italy. Of course, when I got there, I'd been there on vacations several times, but when I got there and started settling in, I really responded to the rural connection with the land and the way the Italians still live very close to the land. I mean, right now in Italy, in where I live, they're out, getting the fresh new nettles and the green almonds and the mushrooms, everything connected with the cycles of the earth, particularly the olive, keep them so grounded. And I loved that. This was in 1990, and I think it's still that way. There's still all over Italy, people still feel this really close connection with the land and the cycles of the seasons. So I came there for the art, but then I got very caught up in just the way of life, that beautiful, lovely connection with the earth and the cycles, and also the sense of community in a small town. I grew up in Fitzgerald, Georgia, which is about the size of my desk here, and also always had this amazing feeling of community, that everyone knows you, they know your family, they know everything about you, they know what you're going to do before you know it yourself. And I grew up that way, but have since lived in cities and felt like reconnecting in Italy to that sense of community. Going into the piazza every morning, getting to know people on that daily kind of basis where you're exchanging recipes, you're commenting on their dog, you're living with them in the piazza, which is the living room. And I loved that kind of sense of reconnection from my earliest life, that grounded way of life. And I still love that best about Cortona, which is where I live. I walk in every morning, sitting at the table by myself, having a coffee, but before long, someone's there, someone else is there. By, an hour later, there may be 10 people at the table, and it's a party. My grandson, when he was little and visited, he loved the piazza atmosphere every morning. And he would say when he got up, "Are we going to the party today?" And, it is like that, to be in the piazza every morning. But that the sense of community, the house, I've always been driven by home, houses, sense of place. Growing up in the American South, I read all of the writers, Eudora Welty, James A.G., William Faulkner, Carson McCullers, Thomas Wolfe. All of them had that grounded sense that place is very important in shaping who you are. And I kind of came to believe that where you are is who you are. Place to me feels that powerful. So, reading all of them, I I would say they shaped my sense of place, but I already had it. Even as a child, I loved the land. I loved the rivers. I loved the storms, the wildness of the southern landscape, the moss-hung oaks, the limestone holes that suddenly open up in the earth, the violence of the land, the beauty of the land, the barrier islands off the coast of Georgia. I had this really deep connection with where I was growing up. And reading the Southern writers, which I started to do mainly in high school, it was an affirmation of that sense of place. And we didn't travel very much from where I lived in this very small town, but the trips we took to me were just mesmerizing. Every place we went to, which was Atlanta or Macon or once to Washington, D.C., but mainly to the coast, to the Okefenokee Swamp, to just the beauty of the South was always with me. And I felt that I was patted into shape by the landscape, by the sense of home, by having a family who had been in that place for a long, long time. I thought I would never leave. It was my place, my destiny. But after I got in high school and started reading and reading, um, I realized I was going to be leaving that place, and I did. But here I am now, centuries later. I'm back in the South. I still like to have my a base in the South. So home, the idea of home is always connected with the idea of travel. Is it best to stay at home or is it best to head for the airport? I'm always mixed on that. And it just slightly leans in the direction of the airport, But home, I've restored a lot of houses. I love making the house, doing things around the house, cooking, entertaining. The whole home thing is 90% of my brain, I think. But then 90% is also leaving home. So I don't know.
Francis, you speak as beautifully as you write. You're already taking us on a journey. When you found Bramasole, it was in 1990, and it took you 3 years to restore this home. I am wondering, was it like a golden moment in history to actually come to Tuscany and to discover this land that was still not on everyone's map to visit? And I wonder what your experience would be if you are to start that step now. Like if you were coming to Tuscany or Cortona for the first time this year, would you have had the same experience?
Not at all. I mean, the world has changed so much. I know that my books had a big impact on the town and changed it to some extent, but it would have changed anyway in many, many, many ways. And I mean, the whole world is different from 1990. When I bought that house, I didn't know anyone who had ever bought a house in a foreign country. I didn't know one soul who had ever done that. And everybody in my family, except my daughter, told me I was crazy and that I would live to regret it. And they were just adamant that this was the worst idea possible. And then I did it and restored the house, and now I can't keep them away, of course. They just think it was always a great idea. But I don't know what I would do if I were thinking of leaving the United States, which a lot of people are thinking of right now. If I were thinking of it now, where would I go? I don't really know. Because 3 years ago, I wrote this book called Always Italy with National Geographic. And for that book, I went to every region of Italy. And it just expanded my ideas so much. I had, of course, traveled a lot in Italy, but when you go as a writer and you are knowing that you're going to be trying to present this region in a way that will make other people appreciate it, um, you do a lot of work and you do a lot of research and you come back to that place and you study it and you get up at dawn in the morning to walk and you talk to everybody you can and you read the history and you read the writers of that area. So writing that book, going to every single region, I found out that there were a lot of places I could very happily live and that would just be marvelous. I mean, the first one I fell in love with was Puglia. I've been back there 6 or 7 times since. I love Friuli. I love Trieste. So many towns up north in Italy, which I did not expect to like as much. I thought my preference would always be pulling me south, south, south. But when I got up into the Trentino Alto Adige area and the Dolomites, it was so staggering. And I even liked the food. I didn't think I would, the heavier, more German influenced food. I thought, it's not Italian, but everything was, I loved everything. And I could live so many places in Italy. I would love to have a chance to live in Rome for a while. Um,
Yes.
it's just so, Italy is endless. That book, I already knew that because I've been there forever and I've been many places, but looking at it from that, trying to see it from the inside out, not the outside in. Often when you're traveling, you're seeing it from the outside, but when you really travel to write about it, you see it in a different, I see it in a different way. And so I just fell in love with the entire country. I could live many places. I've been to Sicily many times now. But when I go back to my house in Tuscany, that's my base, that's my place, that's my third floor study where I've written all these books. We have so many friends. It's where I have traveled out from, so it's home. And that was an idea that I really explored during the COVID years when I could not get back and forth the way I usually travel. Um, I I wrote a book called A Place in the World, Finding the Meaning of Home. So I wrote all these essays about homes I had had and why I left them and why I came back to them. And through all that, for the past many, many years, that Bramasole has been the place that has pulled me the most. I wish it weren't so. I wish my own native country pulled me the way it does, but you can't argue with your metabolism. You get to a place and you respond to it, and you can't help it, and you have to pay attention to that
Yes.
because those kinds of responses are telling you something about yourself and what you really want, what you really need. So I think that idea of home, where's home? Sometimes it seems like you get to a country, to a place, and you feel at home there, and and you're not going to be, and you're going to be leaving there, but you think, huh, this is really, this is really where I could live. And I've had that happen in Mexico. I've had it happen in Crete. And it's mysterious because then you leave, but you always leave something, you take something of the place or leave something in the place, and it's always with you that you know that the world is various and that you could be extant in another version in those places. So that's the lure part that partly the lure of travel is
Yes.
seeing those different homes
And Francis,
at home in the world.
I know that for your book, Always Italy, you visited actually 80 places all along the boot, from the
Oh,
top all the way to the most southern part. And I was thinking many Italian writers or people I know have never seen so many parts of their country. I'm in Venice right now and the
yes.
bells are ringing, they're calling probably for the mass. And I think also many of my Italian friends who maybe sometimes come to Venice and they actually are coming here almost like they're coming to a foreign country. Well, Venice is
Yeah,
special in its way. It is a special place, really, a place kind of
yeah.
out of the borders of imagination, I guess, as well. Um, but I think for what you did for Cortona and in a way for Tuscany, was I think probably something that you never even expected. The way that your book
Oh,
resonated with so many people. I
no.
think you sold what 2.5 million copies, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the number is now even bigger,
I think it's
5 million.
something like that.
For me, the most kind of precious memory of Santa Croce was when I was working with the Franciscan friars. This is the place where Michelangelo and Galileo are buried. And at one point, we were talking about promotion of Santa Croce, but also Florence and Tuscany. And one of the Franciscan friars, they live in the convent. This is their life. And he said, this American woman actually wrote a book, something under the sun. So even the Franciscan friars, knew about your book. And I thought you really did
So,
put Tuscany on the map. And after that, so much has happened. And I love that they gave you honorary citizenship of the of the city. So it is really where you belong. It is a home, and you made it home.
Yes, it is. I'm also honorary citizen in Arezzo and the godmother of the Antique Festival. My husband claims it's because I've spent so much money there, but I don't think that's true. We furnished all I we furnished. I restored two houses in Italy, and we have, you know, made our home from that Arezzo market. They have things there that you can't imagine that you are allowed to buy. I mean, you see a 14th century angel. No, you can buy that. Not that I have, but I love the market there. I love the whole sense of market all over Italy. And when I was writing Always Italy, I always tried to be in places on market day because that's where you really get a sense of the town and you overhear the conversations and you talk about the hyacinth bulbs that they're going to cook and things that you don't even know about, you're discovering in these places. I love the markets. They've endured for centuries and centuries, and they're still going strong. Often, some of the vendors are not Italian anymore, and that's kind of you know startling after having so many years of experience and them being just so local. But there's still you still go down into Camucia in the mornings on Thursday, and the market is all over town, and you're going to have a great time at that market. You're going to get a little porchetta sandwich. You're going to try on some outlandish blouse. You're going to buy wooden spoons. It's part of that sense of community that I was talking about earlier. It's kind of centralized on still on the markets all around. Antique markets are one thing, but just, the daily markets are so much fun.
Yes, yes. Um, talking about the sense of community, I think that's an interesting point. If you think about the times of the we're living now of the mass tourism, what do you think will be the future of maybe the smaller Italian cities that are not on anyone's map to visit, but they're as lovely and beautiful as any of the big cities? I feel
I'm
people are
hoping.
becoming more and more focused on maybe going to the 10 things that they see highlighted on Instagram, and they will literally
Yeah,
spend an hour and a half in Via dei Neri waiting to try the sandwich from Antico Vinaio. So how can we help that? And what do you think will be the future of the cities?
I just can't imagine that anyone would really want to go to Florence in July. I think there's so much in Italy that is just as enchanting as not as Florence, but there are many, many wonderful cities, Viterbo, just endless medium-sized towns that can give you the flavor of Italy, give you so much. Every town has its art treasure. Every town has its pasta, its recipes. You can just put yourself down in many other places other than Venice and Florence and Siena and the places that people do congregate. I think there's just traveling. People talk about Italy being crowded. You get away from those places, it's not crowded at all. Even Tuscany is not. You 2 miles outside Cortona, you're in these beautiful little villages in the mountains. They're wonderful walks. They're great places to picnic, and you get places like Monterchi. There's Piero della Francesca, the Madonna del Parto. There she is in that tiny village. It's not crowded. You go on that whole Piero della Francesca trail. I've never seen San Sepolcro crowded, and there's the best art in the whole Renaissance right in that little town.
But I
It's there, but mass tourism, it's a factor, but we're not going to get away from it. Everybody wants to travel, of course, and they have the right to, I think. But I was in Asia in January of this year and last year, and there's not mass tourism in any of the places I went, except, maybe Bangkok. if you really want to avoid the European crowds, head to Asia.
Yeah. Can we talk about Asians who are actually living in Italy? You know, so many businesses now in Venice are actually owned by Chinese owners. And I see so many kids on the streets now. If you see an elementary school, children going to the museum, they will actually be probably
That's
half and half, you know, half
uh
locals and then immigrants. And I
Isn't
think
that's the way of the world now?
it
It's
is. And it is. And,
yes,
you know, kind of you
I
wonder,
was
will they be the next Venetians or the next Florentines? And
yes,
you know, the way Bramasole changed your life, will these new generations coming to these towns give them a new sense of life?
yes, they have to, I guess. I made a stop in Doha for a couple of days. I never really expected to go to Doha, but it was kind of on the way, and I thought, let's take a look. I was stunned by uh, the number of people from other parts of Asia and Indonesia, India, who were in Doha. It's happening everywhere. People are on the move and they are seeking opportunities and they're finding it in these emirate countries. I think in Dubai, 15% of the people who live in Dubai are from there. The rest of them have come from other places. It's very vibrant because it's young people from all of these Indonesian countries and all over who are coming there for work. And it's changing the world. I remember many, many years ago when I lived in San Francisco, I had Salman Rushdie over for dinner, and he had published this book called Shame. So I baked a cake for him and I put shame on the cake, and we had this wonderful evening together. But one thing he said that time so long ago was the story of our time is the migration of people in the world. It's not all the other things we think it is. It's the migration. And, you know, the United States torn apart by it, Europe's torn apart by it. There's a kind of basic thing that people have that they don't want foreigners on their land. It happens. But that's the way the world is moving now. And we'll see what happens. But
Yes.
Venice, I've noticed, lots of places. I mean, all over Italy, the older generation, the people who can't uh, manage by themselves at home anymore, they have the Filipino nurse walking them through the piazza, which is lovely. It's lovely that they're not stuck off in some home the way they happen to end up in the United States. They're still out in their community. And these women who have them by the arm are living a new life. It's kind of beautiful.
Yes. Yes. And you kind of think also these cities, well, something like Venice, the city that was never really meant to be, right? There is no building material to build with, there is no drinking water, there was no land to build on, and still the city survives even today.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
I wanted to, I think many of the people on this call are travelers and they come to Italy all the time. And I wanted to talk about a little bit more about how we can be meaningful and mindful travelers.
Yeah,
Sometimes I feel it's listing the fancy restaurants that people go to kind of check them off the list. But I believe to travel is to transform us completely. And I had a bit of that when I went to Egypt just last month. There was so much that I couldn't predict. I didn't know the culture at all. I don't speak the language. And yet I feel it was the most meaningful travel I have done because it was such an exotic place filled with art, with contradiction. And I felt like I was actually on a pilgrimage. So can we talk about that a little bit? Your idea of traveling as pilgrimage.
yes, I think that is a way to think intelligently about travel now. And it's something I always keep in mind when I'm planning a trip is why am I going there? And Egypt, you and I were there at similar times, and that was such a coincidence. Egypt, is one of those places that you think as long as I'm passing through this life, I really need to see Egypt. I really need to see Angkor Wat. I really need to see this, this, and this. And you think pilgrimage, you're not going toward a saint for these kinds of pilgrimages, but you're going toward something very big and meaningful culturally to you, and something that's part of your curiosity about the world. So when I think of travel now, many people are in horribly stressed jobs and they're exhausted and they don't know what to do with themselves, and they go on vacations to recoup their energy, to have a massage, to go to the wine bar, to just rest. But that's certain kind of travel. That kind of travel is not that interesting because you can kind of do those things anywhere. What's interesting is Egypt, is Turkey, is the culture and what you can experience and understand about the earth by going there. I love the idea of pilgrimage. I loved it from the Chaucer course I took in college when the professor made us learn the prologue to the Canterbury Tales in Middle English, and we all had to recite it. But I loved the idea of these 29 pilgrims setting off to see Thomas Becket. And that was my first exposure, I think, to what a pilgrimage really was. But the whole idea of pilgrimage, people still go on them. They go on the St. Francis Way, the one in Finland, the one in Spain, Compostela. People still go on those kinds of pilgrimages and they're wonderful. But I like the idea of pilgrimage in that you set yourself a quest, that you are after something that you need, something you're interested in, something you just want to explore. And you do a lot of preparation for this trip, and then you get there and you learn as much about it as you can and meet as many people as you can, explore the cuisine, everything you can possibly soak in. That's your pilgrimage. Who knows what other uh, fulfillments in yourself you're looking for, but you take those along with you. And sometimes getting out of where you are into new space where you are no one and you're passing through and you don't matter and you're just free. You're free to look and to think about it in ways that may help you, may enlighten you, all that kind of thing. I
Yes.
still use a notebook. I take a lot of photos. I relive my trips when I get back. They don't have a time frame exactly. They exist before and after. So to me, the pilgrimage, it has a big arc. But I
Yes.
love the idea of thinking of it as pilgrimage, even though mine may be secular. I do like the saints, but I don't feel compelled to go visit them particularly. But um, just like Angkor Wat was, I couldn't believe I was finally looking at Angkor Wat. And then that opened up the whole background of the Khmer Rouge, that whole tragic era. So it wasn't all fun. It was a lot of painful knowledge that I got I knew about the history in general, but when you're there among the people and experiencing their lives and seeing where they live, you certainly get a different perspective on history.
Yes. Yes. I think
So,
the full immersion, that's for sure. Um,
yes.
Francis, there's so many writers who are on this call, creative writers who are big fans of yours, and for them, I wanted to maybe take our direction in our conversation in that direction. How is your writing process? You write fiction. Your new book just came out called The Great Marriage. How the idea for that come, and how do you divide your travel writing from completely fiction writing. We have just popped in the link to your newest book. If anyone wants to order it on, well,
A
on
great
Amazon.
marriage. I loved writing that book. I think I would have probably had more success as a writer if I had stuck with one genre. But I've never been able to. I started out as writing poetry, and then when I wrote Under the Tuscan Sun, it just happened. It was spontaneous. I was used to writing poetry. I bought the house in Italy, and I started out wanting to continue in my notebooks with my poetry. I taught poetry. It was my life. My husband's a poet. But I started finding as I was writing about Italy that it was kind of exploding in all kinds of directions, and it was no longer falling into little short lines or even run-on lines. But I started writing. I thought, oh, I'm writing prose. So I wrote that book. I wrote three memoirs about Italy. Then I started writing the travel books, and I loved that process. It was so much fun. And then I've always been a reader of novels. I read maybe two or three a week. It's just my thing. I read fiction constantly. And so I always thought that I would write novels. So finally, I wrote a novel, Swan, which was based on the town where I grew up. And then I've written two novels since then. And then I wrote A Place in the World, which was a book of essays about home. So I've written across all these genres, memoir, poetry, fiction, travel. I probably should have stuck with one thing, but I guess I have this kind of magpie, what's shiny out there, that I get interested in. So it's just the way I work. And I work a lot, but I work very erratically. I don't have a schedule. My husband writes poetry at 6 in the morning in the dark. He has a ritual around writing, but I can write on the plane. When I was flying to Japan, I was writing an article about the Okefenokee Swamp while I was in the air. Once I get it, get going, I can write no matter where I am. I go for weeks without writing, and I don't care because I know I've been writing long enough to know that I can trust my process, that it comes back to me, and then I get my hands around something and I can just really get a lot done. So I don't have a real good model for, a outline or anything like that. I don't ever have an outline. I love the first line of a book. I always look at the first line when I'm reading something and try to see if that first line is going to take me all the way through the book. This Under the Tuscan Sun starts, I'm about to buy a house in a foreign country. That was an unusual line at that time, wouldn't be so now, but that line took me through the book. My new book, A Great Marriage, came to me because the first line came to me as the wine spilled. And I didn't know why or who, but that line opened up the book to me and took me all the way through the book. So process is mysterious. People have, rituals around what they do and don't do, but mine's pretty spontaneous.
Love it. In your interview at San Francisco State University, where you taught for many years, you say, usually you write a book, there is a buzz, and then things settle down. Under the Tuscan Sun seems to have legs and a will of its own. It keeps leading me in different directions. Um, where did it leave you? Where is it still leading you? Or have you explored all the directions with Under the Tuscan Sun? I know there's so many
It,
byproducts.
it does keep on trucking. I don't know. It does have a life of its own. Some books do that. You kind of hold on to their kite tail and you go. It's been translated into 50 languages. And when I wrote it, I thought if anyone likes this book, it'll be, someone like me, a literary traveler, someone who uh, likes to cook and read and look at art and things like that. So I was stunned when it started getting translated into, you know, Estonian and all Chinese and all these languages. That's been the huge surprise of it. I think the effect I feel most of it now is that people still come to my house a lot. All these years later, um, they come. We have a shrine, Madonnina, at the bottom of our driveway. And in the book Under the Tuscan Sun, I wrote about this man who brought flowers there every day. He would throw away his old wildflower
I
bouquet
remember.
and put the new one on, and that was in the movie as well. So this Madonnina at the bottom of our driveway, people come to it still. The old man who brought the flowers died, and by that time, my books had become more well known, and people started leaving other things in the shrine. And it's still every day, somebody leaves a coin, a little flag, a note, sometimes a bottle of wine. I really like those people. And they bring, sometimes they leave a book or a pine cone, a sprig of lavender, sprig of rosemary. The shrine is full of things that people have left. And I love that. I now and then have to clean it out because it gets really messy. But I really love the fact that something someone read pulled them to that place. And it's the way I think about travel a lot is what is the power of these places that you want to go to that pull you there? What is it, Angkor Wat? You know, why? With the pilgrims, the saints, you know why. That's a spiritual thing, but there are these places that pull you and they want you there. And you know they want you there and you're going, you know.
And imagine also the people who actually come to your shrine. It's not just down the road. They have to actually make a plan to go there. So it is a pilgrimage of their own, in a
Yeah.
way. I think what was fascinating for me on the trip to Egypt, I would go to all these wonderful tombs of the queens and the kings. And then one that really blew me away were the tombs of the artisans, of the working
Yes.
people, because this is where the real life scenes, this is like Giotto's chapel. And some of them even have the blue ceilings with beautiful stars, like we see,
Um,
in Giotto's Scriveni chapel.
yeah.
And usually when you would go in, they would be the guard, someone who is there every day, and this is their job, to just be
Yeah.
underground in these crazy conditions. And I
Yes.
would always leave them a tip. And my friend said, "Why are you giving them tip? You've already paid a ticket." Some of them were like 40 euro to enter. And I thought, they're there, they're waiting for, us to come and make their day. And they ask you
Yes.
where you're from, and kind of they are actually making this place alive or come to life.
Yes.
Um, just unbelievable. What are you working on now? Can I even ask that
I
question?
I am writing about pilgrimages right now, and I started a Substack, so I've been kind of preoccupied with getting that going. It's really been fun. I like the freedom of that format and the way that you can create your own kind of sense of community around a subject. My Substack's on travel, of course, but also on home and other pleasures. But I am hoping to put together a book of essays next, and this uh, the half of it will be on the writing process, and part of it will be on travel, and the other part will be on just some miscellaneous subjects that have occupied my attention.
Interesting, interesting. Um, Francis, if you don't mind, I would love to see if our listeners have a question for you. Maybe we can take a look. Um, People have sent questions to me before we started, and one of the questions was, what did you learn from a renovation process in a foreign country when you started renovating your home? which is basically such a big part also of your movie,
Oh,
or the movie itself, Under the Tuscan Sun.
the renovation was our way into the community. If we had had the money at that time just to hire someone and say, do this, we'll be back in 4 months, we wouldn't have made nearly the connections with people that we were able to make by uh, being involved in the renovation. I was on the floor and Ed was on the ceiling, scraping, and the workers who were doing things we couldn't do, they took us in. They started bringing us olive oil. They started inviting us to their children's first communions. We made our connections that way. And I think if I've seen later people who do come in and just order it, buy it. And they seem to often have many of their connections be other expats. But I didn't ever want to live in Italy that way. I love many, many of the other foreigners who live around there. We're great friends and have marvelous times, but it's Italy. I wanted to know the people in the town, and renovation was just a really easy way to do that. We're still close to some of the people who helped us early on. And you mentioned earlier that the renovation took 3 years. It was an on and off process. But that renovation has had several iterations since then. So we finally had to replace the roof on the house. It was 350 years old. And Ed said the warranty had definitely run out. And that was a huge project to replace that old tile roof. We were able to add on a bathroom. We were able to add on another little building. But we've done a lot of renovation. Each time it's a discovery. We did some interior work and we found just 2 years ago these frescoes in the bedrooms that had been painted over. The guy started scrubbing it down and this kind of drapery began to emerge. And we realized that whole bedroom had been kind of trompe l'oeil draperies. And we stripped off as much of it as we could. But I love the renovation because with old houses, they always have more to tell you. So here we are, all this many years later, still discovering things in this old house. Uh, Early on, when we had to take the floor up because a stream was running through the house, they took the floor up and there were all these big stones underneath. And one of them was this big square stone that had incised on it IHS, the Christian IHS. Was that originally a chapel of the house, or was that something from an earlier building? I've lived in old houses here, of course, not as old, but they always have things to tell you. In my farmhouse here in North Carolina that we left and was the reason I wrote A Place in the World, we redid the attic and made it into a room, and we found all the beams had Roman numerals on them. And they had been covered up all the years since 1806 when the house was built. But there were those Roman numerals. They had been there all along. And then we found a shoe behind uh, some of the wattle board or whatever it was. And then I read later that it used to be a tradition when people built houses then in the 1800s and 1700s too, that they hid a shoe for good luck. So we found that shoe. I love the process of renovation, but I am done with it now. I've done it. I'm
Yeah.
still interested in a wallpaper bathroom or a new backsplash in the kitchen, but going into huge projects like that, I just want to travel more. I don't want to spend the time that way right now.
You know, in Renaissance, when they would build houses, there was a big tradition to actually throw coins in and even dried flowers for good luck. They were part of the
Uh-huh.
the basis of the palazzi. And we know that a lot when they are doing the Palazzo Strozzi. There is all kinds of people writing, going to visit this construction site. Many people are also bothered because there is dust and all kind of things happening because they had to ruin so many tower houses to make this palazzo. But there are people who also say, I took my little son and, I gave him the rose to put inside.
Uh,
And very often they would actually consult an astrologer and they would ask, okay, what is the best time to start building? And in case of Palazzo Strozzi, they said, well, you should actually start in the month of August. That way the palace will be in the sign of Leo and its
oh,
doors and its doors will be open for eternity, which it actually really works. Even though the Strozzi family does not live there anymore, the doors are open because it's now a museum. The new show is opening there now. There will be a wonderful show happening next year on Fra Angelico, which
mm,
actually will be really great because Cortona has so many Fra Angelicos as well. But in any case, I'm wondering when they started building Bramasole, if they did talk to someone and if that someone said to them, well, in 300 years, there will be a woman coming in and she will make this place famous and there will be a bed that Diane Lane was, jumping on in the movie
right.
as a part of its story, because now you definitely are a part of its story.
Yes. Yes. One of our rooms has a scent, and I don't know what causes this scent, but when the priest came once to bless the house in the spring, he said there must be a saint buried in the wall for the room to smell like this. And we redid that room, and then the scent came back. It's kind of a musky perfume, like a potpourri type scent. And people come in, they notice it. There's no reason for that scent to be there. So, houses are mysterious, and it's just something you get to explore over and over if you're renovating.
Yes. And if you have enough love for it to take care of it and cherish it. Actually,
I'm always really fascinated by how cleverly the people who built these houses 3, 4, 500 years ago, how clever they were at siting them. You see how houses are positioned, and they really knew their sky, they knew their wind, they knew, and that's something I'm always fascinated by in architecture is that where exactly are you going to orient yourself and place this place so that it thrives in its place.
one of the questions here is how do you feel about the movie? What do you think they left out what they left out about your experience?
Well, they left out a lot. I like the movie. I love Diane Lane in it. And Audrey Wells, who was the screenwriter and director, she was marvelous. It was so much fun watching it being put together. Although a lot of watching a movie being made is like watching paint dry. It's really slow, but I loved watching it come together. And I knew that they would be changing a lot of things, that it was not going to be my quiet book about renovating a house, because I already knew Ed. It wasn't a romantic quest for me to go there. So I knew they were going to change it, but I think, they stuck to basic story. Foreign woman changes life. It was pretty accurate in that way. I thought it should have had a little bit more about the house, but they did it the way they wanted to. But it's weird. It's weird. It's like the book in a way because it wasn't a huge critical success by any means, but it has become a kind of cult movie. People tell me they have seen it 40 times or 30 times, and I'm thinking, I haven't seen it but 4 times maybe, but it's become kind of a cult movie, and it's still shown on all the flights to Italy, and it takes off, has a life of its own.
Yes. There's one more. I'll just say maybe this is the last question. Jumping around, Bernini or Borromini? Thoughts on Shelby Foote? Is Delphi on your pilgrimage list?
Say that again?
One of the questions is Bernini or Borromini? Do you have a
Oh,
preference between the two?
no, I don't. No.
And is
You?
Delphi on your pilgrimage list?
I've been there. I That was definitely on my list a long time ago. So what is your preferred pronunciation? How
Um, I think
you?
I love Bernini. I'm
Yeah.
not really, I have to make a confession here, but I'm not really a big fan of Rome. I know this is
Oh,
crazy. No,
that's heresy.
I love my life in Florence. I love Venice, but Rome is just too big for me. Well, anyway, I shouldn't even talk about that now. Because our time is actually running out. Um, Francis, I have to say thank you so much for coming to the Studiolo. It was really an
Thank
honor
you,
to
and
have
thank
you.
all of you for coming to join us.
Yes. And when you left your teaching job, I read one of the interviews, and at San Francisco State University, your colleagues were actually talking about what an amazing teacher you were and what an amazing colleague you were. And your students also were writing about the impact you had on them. But you actually didn't really retire from teaching. I think what you did is you left the classroom, but you actually started teaching all of us how
Oh,
to
thank
slow
you.
down, how to travel, how to find our inner rhyme in our own everyday living. So I really thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Wow, that's beautifully, beautifully said. I love that. Thank you.
And I hope I will see you in the Piazza soon in Italy. I might have to
Definitely
come to your throne and leave maybe a bottle of wine or something like that.
come for lunch.
Yes,
I'll pick you up at the train.
thank you. And
Well,
next week we will have Livia Frescobaldi with us, who will talk about her beautiful book called Inside Florence. And then after that, the next studio appointment will be April 5th, where I have the 100th interview, and I have Ross King, one and only Ross King, who was my first ever guest in the Studiolo. He will actually come and we will talk about the Rome. And this is the 100th episode of Paola Studiolo, and it's the first episode on Rome. So that tells you how much I love the city. But yes, it's going to be really fun because we're going to be going and talking about what is a jubilee and why would people actually sometimes even risk their lives to make it all the way to Rome on that specific occasion. So thank you, everyone. I will see you next time.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Grazie.
Ciao.
Ciao.